Alrighty, hello. How are you? What do you feel like talking about today?
Hi there. Just some like grad school life, and just like school being kind of tough.
Yeah.
I had an issue this week, um, with like one of my lab reports. I like pushed it off a little too long, which is my fault, but it was just really difficult. I couldn't figure it out in the time I gave myself, and so I had to like turn it in with it like not being completed. So like I feel like I definitely failed it, and so that's just hard to like cope with.
So when you were getting ready to turn that in, and when you were working on that, kind of what were the thoughts that were going through your head while you were kind of feeling that anxiety around the assignment?
I was definitely I was like mad and upset with myself because like I failed it, so like it made me feel like a failure. I like there's I don't know, like I'm fail like I failed the assignment. I failed like I didn't learn anything in my mind, so like I failed, and it just made me feel really bad about myself and like I didn't accomplish anything, even though I worked really hard and I pulled all nighters for it, but like I still didn't learn anything. So I felt like a failure.
Yeah. I mean, what like when you're feeling this, because you've mentioned several times throughout this that you feel like a failure and that you failed at something. What is kind of the evidence that supports these thoughts? Like, why do you, when you feel something like that, you feel it very passionately, those feelings really take over. But what about, um, so sorry, one second. Oh, what evidence really supports those feelings that you're having?
Um, I mean, it's not a lot. It was just more of a fact that I like didn't complete the assignment and I know that I'm going to get a bad grade on it. And like historically, like the first lab I did, I didn't do very well on either. So it's like I just keep kind of calling back to that of like, I started this class out at a lower score and a lower grade, and I'm like halfway through now, and gosh, technically I'm not getting any better because I just failed this other assignment. So like it felt like it made it a pattern, and so like it kind of made me feel like, oh God, I'm gonna fail the class.
Yeah, no, I mean that's completely fair to kind of have those feelings and thoughts. Um, are there other times that you have felt like this where you really feel like in other assignments that you've turned in that you feel like you're a failure? You mentioned it, you feel like it's a little bit of a pattern, but are there times not just within this course and others that you have those thoughts?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's definitely moments where I feel like I'm not I'm not doing everything I need to do, and I feel like I'm working really hard, but I'm not making any progress. And so like when I go to like talk with my professor and things like that, like it's like, oh, I pulled an all-nighter, and they're like, for what? And I'm like, to get this assignment done, but I don't feel like I've like done like I don't feel like I've made any progress. It's like I'm working, but it's like, what am I working on? It feels like I'm like working harder,
Yeah.
but or maybe smarter if I'm not getting stuff done. But like it's definitely, I don't know, I just feel like anytime I feel like, okay, I have a meeting and I go into it and then somebody asks one question, and all of a sudden I like fall apart because I'm like, I don't know anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, um, do you feel like are there times where you have had these same thinking patterns, but is there any evidence that you've seen to support kind of maybe not being a failure?
I mean, it was kind of funny yesterday at the same time. I turned my lab in the morning, cried. And then we got like an email while I was in my other class from that professor of like, hey, I forgot to turn your homeworks in. Like I handed them out in your mailbox. Like, just know like I'm not being lenient anymore. And she kind of made the email sound kind of like negative, and it was like some of you didn't get high enough scores because you didn't have sufficient work and those kinds of things. So I read that email and immediately panicked. I was like, oh my God, I got a low score on this too. Perfect. And I got it, but I got a 99 on the homework assignment. So that was kind of a quick pivot of like, okay, I turned this in the morning, definitely didn't do it, like gonna fail. But then also like the homework assignment I did the week before, I was like, oh, I got a 99.
Yeah, so it sounds like there are maybe those thoughts of being a failure aren't always accurate. Would you agree with that statement of sometimes, why do you think that you have those feelings? Like, why do you feel that you're a failure? Because that's a common word that keeps coming up. Why do you feel that way? Where does that belief maybe come from?
Um, I know like personally something I'm bad about is I feel like I have to be perfect all the time and like I have to be good at everything like as soon as like the first time I do it. And so sometimes that like in school that's really hard for me to turn off of like, okay, yeah, right, I don't know how to code, but I need to be good at it. I need to be perfect at it, but I don't have the skills to know how to do it.
Yeah.
So
So, looking at this situation, I'm gonna ask you kind of a bigger question. What is the worst case scenario in this situation? And try to pull yourself from that I'm a failure mindset and like think maybe like really logically about this. What, you know, uh, sorry, one second. Um, what is the worst thing that could happen, right? What is the worst case scenario?
mm, I mean, worst case scenario is that I don't get the grade I want. Like I want an A. Maybe I get a B or a C, which is unfortunate, but it's not like I'm gonna fail the like I'm not gonna fail the class. It's not anything like that.
Yeah.
So
No, and I think that's good. Can you uh, think of it also too of like if you had maybe a friend who came to you with this same situation, and they told you that the worst case scenario was a B or a C, what would you maybe say to them?
I would say that that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I
because
don't know.
I think
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's easier. Those feeling patterns are really deeply ingrained into us, right? We learn them typically from a very young age, and for some reason we sink our claws into them. Um, and so I think it's really important sometimes to take a step back and look, um, because we're typically much kinder to others than we are to ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, so what happens if you get a B or a C? What does that look like? What would you do?
Um, I mean, for me, the reason why like I feel particularly like inclined to get an A in this class is because it's the one that my professor teaches, like the professor that I work for. So I feel like there's like an extra pressure of like, oh, I'm her student. So I like have to get an A in her class.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid that like I don't want her to think I'm dumb or anything like that if I don't do really well in the class.
Um, so here's another question. You sound like you have a lot of respect for this professor, and based on what I know about you, I know that there is somewhat of a longer relationship with this professor, and it seems like they have given you a lot of opportunities and really appreciated your work. Um, so think about it, maybe try to reverse it and look at it from their perspective. Do you think that they would think you're dumb?
I would hope not. I don't think so. I think that's the nice thing about like getting this higher degree with somebody I've already worked for. Like she knows the caliber of my work and like she's worked with me in a very similar capacity before. So there's at least kind of like an understanding there and kind of like a base level. Like she knows she doesn't have to focus on some things with me or like she's already kind of picked out some of my strengths and maybe some of the things that she would want to teach me a little bit more. So
Yeah. And it sounds like you recognize those kind of thoughts that are automatic in our brain when something, maybe doesn't go the way we expected it to, or something doesn't turn out the way that we had wanted it to. And even sometimes when it does, we have those thoughts that just kind of they pop up there. They're
mhm,
there. But it sounds like you're very aware of them, and I think that that's really important going forward is being able to identify those, because we talk a lot about in CBT, kind of the way I would describe it is like a little holy trinity of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, and how all of those kind of are interconnected. Because I know we've talked a little bit about some education and all those different things. Um, and I think you're doing a really good job at being able to articulate those. And do you see a way maybe next time if something like this happens again, I know you probably don't want it to, but life has different plans for us sometimes. Do you
Mhm.
see maybe how you could take a step back from those automatic thoughts? Like, how do you think you would do that in that situation?
Good question. I think, I mean, I think it is important. It's kind of like a double-edged sword in the fact that, like, yeah, it's my professor and I want to do well because I work for her, but also, again, like, I kind of have luck compared to everybody else in the class of like she actually knows me and who I am and those things. So, um, like, she's somebody I can be like a little more forthcoming to, and I know that I can, pop into her office and like have a more honest, like, I don't know, like actual like have a conversation of like, ah, help.
Yeah, building rapport often means we get a little bit of grace.
Mhm.
And it sounds like when you're talking now, you can hear that you can see that she acknowledges you as an intelligent and smart individual. And I think that's a really great kind of place to start with all this is reminding yourself that like she must like something about you. She must think you're good in some aspect if she keeps having you come back.
Mhm.
Yeah. Alrighty, well we will see you next week.